The reality is that we are imperfect people. We grow up in an imperfect world, and we have imperfect parents. And because of that, there are going to be things that we experience during our lifetimes that wound us in a way. And we will try to find some kind of way of coping with that woundedness, particularly if that is a woundedness that came as some kind of attachment in injury, so to speak, like where we felt betrayed, or we felt belittled, we felt shamed, we felt, hurt or unsafe, right? We will develop some coping mechanisms in order to try to manage the emotional baggage from that stuff. And those coping mechanisms, while they were effective at keeping us alive and sane during a very dysfunctional time in our lives, when we are trying to build a healthier way of living, we're trying to build healthier relationships and feel better about ourselves and move forward in our life in some way, a lot of those same coping mechanisms that we had from before get brought into today's world, right? Into our adulthood. And when we're trying to change, it's like some of those ways of viewing people and interacting with people and how we set boundaries or not set boundaries and things like that, whether we make ourselves vulnerable, what we look for in other people, what we consider red flags, and all of these kinds of things. A lot of that really comes from our wounded place from before. And now when let's say we're in a relationship and we're like, God, why do we keep fighting about the exact same things? Right. And we start looking at, well, how are you guys communicating? What sort of things are triggering? What's going on here? What oftentimes happens is that people are like, oh, I'm totally willing to change words that I say and all of that, because all of that feels safe because it is not tied to some emotional woundedness that happened in the past. But if you're asking me to be vulnerable, or you're asking me to change my perspective on whether, my partner is safe or not, then it's like I'm unwilling to go there. And even if you're willing to go there, it may be difficult to go there because that is tied to a sense of woundedness, and we're very afraid to go there. And so there was a friend of mine once. She was desperately trying to find a partner. Right. And she was so lonely, and her whole vision is she wants to get married. She wants to have a family. She wants all of these things. I mean, these are things that she wants very, very badly. But every time she meets somebody and they start to get close, she starts to push them away. And she starts throwing up all of these, well, he doesn't read enough newspapers. He doesn't listen to this particular radio, just all of these things that on the surface are like, why would that matter? And when I would push back a bit and just, and say, why is that important? You could just see this visceral response, right? That she feels very unsafe, and she is so afraid of being hurt that it is easier to create this wall. Now, changing the way she communicates and using different words and all of that, totally willing to do, right? Because that is not addressing what is really at the root cause of her being stuck, which is she's very afraid of being hurt. She's afraid of vulnerability. She's afraid that once somebody gets close to her, that she is going to be hurt. And she was unwilling to let go of that wall that she put up. She would just justify it in her mind. It's like, well, no, these are just things that are important to me and all of that. And I'm like, well, there's also things that are important to you, like being married, being in a relationship, feeling the presence of a partner who loves you and cares about you and helps you feel safe and can navigate through challenges with you and move through life with you as a team member and a life partner. It's like you so desperately want that, but the very thing that is keeping you from being able to achieve that is too scary to let go. So what I would challenge you is if you are stuck in a place in your life, I'm willing to bet that there is something in your life, right, in the way you show up in the world, some boundary you've set, some expectation that you have, something that you're just unwilling to compromise on, that is coming from some wounded place in the past that is the very anchor that is keeping you from moving forward in your life, right? And this is not, it's not that you should beat yourself up over it, right? This is just kind of a normal thing. What I would invite you to do is take a little bit of time. And if you're stuck in some kind of pattern, right, you can't seem to find the right partner, it's like every time you try to do something, you all of a sudden find yourself exhibiting behaviors that undermine the very thing that you're trying to do, whether it's a business, whether it's, getting healthier, whether it's a relationship, regardless of what it is, there's something that gets triggered. And we go through a shift where we have this initial optimism and we're out there and trying to build something or engaging in a new relationship or something. And then all of a sudden we get to a place where there's this shift where all of a sudden we stop showing up, or we start actively undermining or questioning, second guessing all of the very things that we were trying to do, that we were trying to build. And in most cases, that is coming from something that happened in the past, right? Where you had to develop some kind of protective mechanism against being hurt again. So, there's this, oh man, I really love this man. I really love this woman who, and I really want to be close. But now that things are moving along and we're actually forming a relationship and we're starting to get closer, now that fear is starting to come up, that protective mechanism is coming up, or if it's, you want to, launch out into a new venture like a business or start an organization or do something like that. And there's this initial enthusiasm and everything seems so right, seems so perfect. It's like, oh man, this is exactly what I want to do. And you start going along and pretty soon there's all of a sudden there becomes kind of this shift where, you may start feeling things like, people are going to know that I'm a fraud. Who do I think that I am? And all of these things. And again, this is all of these things are coming from a fear of being hurt, a fear of being disappointed, a fear of being humiliated or shamed or something like that. And I would just offer that if you can identify where that block is and allow yourself to feel it, but move forward anyway, that is going to do a lot of good for you. And now I just want to say that with a little bit of a caveat, right? Because there is also, at the same time, this intuitive sense that we all have where we can sense when danger is real. And one of the things that happens a lot in people who have experienced some kind of, emotional trauma, particularly attachment trauma in their past, it's like they tend to not see danger where danger actually exists, and they tend to see danger where none exists, right? There's kind of this, I don't know how to pick up accurately. I don't know how to trust my gut when I'm looking at social cues to figure out, is there danger here or not? And so what I would offer is that find somebody that you trust. Look to a trusted friend or something like that. And when you're starting to have some of these questions come up about a relationship or about a new venture or something like that, where all of a sudden it feels like you're starting to backpedal and you don't know why, I would check in with a friend and just say, here's what's going on. And I could feel myself starting to backpedal and kind of undermine the very thing that I wanted. And I don't know whether this is coming from truly I am seeing a warning flag, or whether this is some internal block that I have that is keeping me stuck in this place of not being successful in some area of my life that I want to have success. And finding, and whether this is a therapist or whether this is a close friend or a family member, particularly somebody who is not just going to say, oh yeah, just, you always have to trust your gut, right? Because frankly, trusting our gut isn't necessarily always the best guide. Sometimes it can be accurate, but sometimes it's not, right? Particularly if we have experienced some trauma in our past, because our ability to perceive things gets altered. And so we don't always see things accurately. So we have to, talk to somebody else who we can kind of borrow their objectivity, so to speak, and say, am I really picking up on a warning flag here? Or is this something that is just me misperceiving things and keeping me stuck? And is this what, do I always just kind of start a new thing, and whether it's a relationship or whatever, and then undermine it over and over and over and over again because I'm really seeing a warning flag? Or is it that there is something in me that I am holding on to and it is tough for me to let go? And that is the very thing that is undermining my own success. So all of us have these, right? And if you have one and it has really been affecting your life, I want to make sure you understand that it doesn't mean that you're stupid, bad, sick, or wrong, right? This is just what happens to the brain when we experience some emotional trauma, particular attachment trauma that comes from childhood, right? Is that our brain all of a sudden starts doing some of these compensatory behaviors, and we have a shift in perspective where we can't always trust it. We can't always trust our instincts. We can't always trust our gut, because oftentimes they are very wrong, particularly when that sense of woundedness gets triggered in some way, even though we may not be consciously aware of it. So I hope you found this helpful. Don't be afraid to let go of your anchors and be fearless. Fortune belongs to the bold, right? And don't be afraid to really challenge some of the real fears that you have, particularly around vulnerability and stepping outside of your comfort zone. It is best to do it with a friend who you trust, and you can check in with them and say, am I perceiving things wrong here? And if it's a good friend, they'll just say, yeah, everything's fine. There's no reason for you to panic. So hope you found this helpful. We'll talk to you soon.